No. But you know what? You know how to work with Zoom? Yeah. Look at your Zoom meeting next and we can talk details.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Boa tarde.
Boa tarde.
Desculpa de chegar atrasado.
Bem, here we go.
Ok. Ver aqui.
She has four that they're massive. Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Manuel, a gente não te pode ver, portanto gostávamos de ver a tua cara. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening or good morning, depending where you're at and what time you will be watching this. This is the sixth panel of the Luso-American Education Foundation Conference, a conference that has been in effect for a very long time. I'll let Bernice talk about that. And this year, virtually. This is our panel on the media in the Portuguese-American community. And we are very, very happy to have all of you with us. The conference this year is put forth, hosted by the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute at California State University, Fresno. Thank you all, and we will be, the moderator will be José Luís Silva, which I'll introduce in just a little bit. But right now I would ask Bernice Polikas if she could please give the welcome on behalf of the Luso-American Education Foundation. Bernice is the president of the Luso-American Education Foundation, and I should also say that we are broadcasting this obviously on Facebook Live. We are, and thanks to all the participants that are with us on the webinar. And then we are also, as we have been all week long since last Saturday, on Televisão Portuguesa de California from our very good friend João Manuel Dias, which we thank, and he is here as a panelist today as well. So Bernice.
Thank you, Denise. And on behalf of the Luso-American Education Foundation and the board of directors, I want to welcome all the panelists to this sixth day of the 44th annual convention conference. And I hope this will be an enjoyable experience for you, as it's been for me for these 6 days that I've been attending. I think we've had some great panelists, and some information that we've been able to glean from all this has been really great. And I'm looking forward to tonight, and then I hope you guys can join us again for the closing tomorrow. I look forward to seeing everybody again. So thank you very much for participating.
Well, thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Bernice, for all of your dedication to the Luso-American Education Foundation. I would like to now introduce our moderator for this panel. We try to keep these to about an hour and 45 minutes or so. We haven't been true to that yet, so I can tell you that we had one that was 1 hour and 48 minutes. Most of them have been around 2 hours to 2 hours and 15. We don't mind that. It's just we don't want to take up a lot of your time, but all of them have discussed issues, and people have brought up issues that are important for the Portuguese-American community. So we have 3 hours of time on Zoom, thanks to Fresno State, but we certainly don't want to go that long, but we might take a little bit more than 2 hours on this topic. Okay, so I will turn to José Luís da Silva. He is an esteemed colleague of mine. He has one advantage over me, and that is he is completely emeritus. He's completely retired from teaching, and taught for over 3 decades at San Jose High School, which has the oldest Portuguese language program in California. José Luís needs no other introduction. He's been in the Portuguese-American community for a very long time. So I'll turn it over to José Luís.
Boa noite a todos. I don't know if you're hearing it, but I'm getting some conversation in the background.
We are now.
Okay, good. Boa noite a todos. I'd like to welcome those of you that make up this wonderful panel, and of course those people, all of you throughout I don't know where, all of you that are listening and watching this session. Today, or tonight, depending where you are, The topic is Portuguese community media in California, building community and connecting with Portugal. That's always been the role of the media, to spread information and throughout our state and beyond, and also bringing in what there is, the news and events from Portugal, so our community can be well informed. And we've had several sessions so far that may connect with this one quite well. We've had the statewide organizations looking at the glue that has historically connected our community. The statewide organizations have done a wonderful job. Our halls, the Holy Ghost, Holy Spirit halls, up and down this state, we have a network of halls, and we've had a session on that. Now we are looking at the media tonight, and this is a very rich area to be discussed. I think it was last night in one of the panels, someone said that at one time there were 60 Portuguese radio stations radio programs in California. That's amazing. In the distant past, we had a daily Portuguese newspaper in California, and of course, Jornal Português, which no longer exists, was at the time the oldest Portuguese newspaper outside of Portugal. So you can see the beautiful history that the media, the Portuguese-American media, represents in this state. I would like to introduce the panel members, and after, just briefly, then they will introduce themselves. We're very lucky to have here tonight several wonderful and distinguished guests. Davide Vieira from KSQQ and KLBS radio stations. Miguel Avila from the Tribuna Portuguesa, Portuguese Tribune, our newspaper in California. Manuel Aguiar from RTA in Artesia. Angela Costa Simões from Politicos podcast. João Manuel Dias from Rádio Portugal USA and Televisão Portuguesa da Califórnia. Joseph Rocha, podcast Cala a Boca, that's the name of the podcast. Diniz Borges, of course, Diniz Borges. What can we say about him? He's the force behind this conference, and all these things have been happening all this week. Without him, we would not have this. And, if there's someone that deserves recognition, is definitely Diniz. And finally, but not least, Anthony Stives for the podcast based on a journey and Capeless Crusaders, two podcasts. Just a little parenthesis. Anthony Stives has the honor of being a nephew of the famous radio personality in California, Joaquin Stives. So you can see, as we were talking before we started here, there's genes in here that have to do with communication, as his uncle was a master at that. So without further ado, I'm going to ask each one of you to introduce yourselves. And unless if anything happens, we're going to always go in the same order so that you know when your time is coming, it's easier for everybody. So I'd like to ask each one of you to please introduce yourselves and the media outlet that you are representing, providing a bit of history on it. So introduce yourselves and the media outlet you're representing. And I'd like to ask each one of you to not go beyond too much, about 4 or 5 minutes per answer. That will keep us on track so that we won't take too long. So I'd like to ask Davide Vieira to introduce himself and the media outlets that he represents.
Well, good evening, everyone. As Luis says, I'm Davide Vieira, and with KLBS and KSQQ, both broadcast in Portuguese, one 24/7. The other just for a couple of hours daily, and then on the weekends, a lot more hours. Also KQLD, Spanish language programming in Los Banos. KLBS is in Los Banos, KSQQ in San Jose. I want to let Anthony know I knew his grandfather, his uncle, Mr. Stives. I knew him quite well. Back in 1974, KRVE came into being, the former KTAO, and Mr. Stives went on the air that day. I believe it was 11 o'clock, and that was the transfer of ownership of that the radio station, 95.3, which today is country music. As far as history goes, KLBS was purchased in 1982 And KSQQ was a brand new station that was purchased with several other people, and the others, all but one, were bought out. And so there's my parents are the majority owners, and then there's a minority owner who actually owns 10% of the San Francisco 49ers, for that bit of trivia, and also brought the Golden State Warriors to California back in the day. And his name is Peter Muley. So that's a little bit of history of the stations dating back to 1974, and I'll pass it on to Zeluís to go on to our next speaker.
Thanks, David. Next is Miguel Ávila from the Portuguese Tribune, Tribuna Portuguesa newspaper.
Good evening, and Zeluís, I'm sure you'll do a much better job than Chris Wallace in this distinguished panel.
Don't mention it.
I wanted, on a serious note, I wanted to send our thoughts and prayers to the President of the United States and the First Lady and all of those who are right now fighting COVID-19. It is a serious disease, and so we need to make sure that we as a society stand together. Let me talk a little bit about the Portuguese Tribune. It was established, actually issue 0 was in July 1979. Issue number 1 was in September 1979. João Brum from the island of Pico and the Azores was the founder. The Portuguese Tribune, for most of its early existence, was in the middle of Little Portugal on Alum Rock Avenue in San Jose. It went through different owners over the years, and then in 2003, my parents acquired the newspaper and actually moved it to Modesto. As the community was moving more from the San Francisco Bay Area to the Central Valley, it made sense that the newspaper accompany that. So the Portuguese Tribune comes after a long history of Portuguese newspapers in California, started in the 1880s. We're actually the 28th Portuguese newspaper in California. There's been 5 others after the Portuguese Tribune. None of them, unfortunately, are in existence today. So we are, as I like to joke with my friend Diniz Borges, we're the only Portuguese newspaper west of the Appalachian Mountains. And so we try to cover as much as we can. Obviously, the focus is on California, but we try to focus all the Western states. So I'll let our distinguished colleagues now introduce themselves.
Thank you, Miguel. And now Manuel Aguiar from RTA Artesia. Welcome.
So Manuel Aguiar, I'm the president of Radio TV Artesia, and also my functions could be anything. I could be a cameraman, I could present the news, I could do interviews or anything else. Radio TV Artesia, it's a station, a non-profit organization, probably the only unique TV station in the United States. We were founded in 1991, and we're celebrating 29 years next year. We're still here. We talk a língua de Camões 24 hours a day. We do have all those hours, but sometimes we don't have enough programming to fill it, because our station works with a bunch of volunteers that do the work because they love to keep the culture alive and our traditions. So basically, everybody that works for RTA, it's a group of volunteers that don't make a dime for anything that we do. The city of Artesia, it's been a big help because they did give us the space that we have the station today. We do not pay anything for that location. We just all we do is come up with a cost for everything else that we need when it comes to equipment or any cameras or anything that we need to do to keep our station functioning. And we thank our community, the city of Artesia and the cities around us that support us. Everything that we do when we do fundraising to keep the lingua camões alive in our in Southern California. So that's basically what we do.
Thank you, Mr. Aguiar. And now Angela Costa Simões in their podcast.
Hi there. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about Politicus here. Just to echo what Mr. Aguiar was saying, this could have been another panel, Diniz, for the Education Foundation, is the voluntary burnout. That everything that is done here in the community is pretty much done by volunteers, and people are burning out. So maybe that's a topic to explore. But we're here to talk about media, and so I will say the first Portuguese podcast I actually helped to launch was Our Portuguese Table with Maria Lawton. And that is still going, even though we haven't had an episode recently. It's been going for about 3 years now. And it was very, very popular. And then that led us to also launch Politicus with Palcus, which I co-host with Diniz, which is the only podcast that we're aware of that talks about politics or interviews of Portuguese-American politicians, and talking about their experience and even issues of the day from a Portuguese-American perspective. On the non-Portuguese side, I host a podcast about 3D manufacturing technology for one of my clients. And so podcasting is something that I do pretty regularly, but it's become a medium that is very popular. And I think it's something that our community should look into more. And I am looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Angela. Now to João Manuel Dias, who has been instrumental in spreading the message of this conference through his media outlets. So João Manuel Dias, please.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this forum, to this panel. Also, thank you, the Luz America Education Foundation, for allowing.
We can't hear you very well, João.
Can't hear.
Thank you, the Luz America Education Foundation, for helping out and allowing me to go ahead and transmit this all week. It's been definitely an experience and a good one. Speaking of myself and the radio station.
Está fraco.
Está fraco?
Tá.
Temos
Da minha parte, não sei dos outros.
Sim.
Da minha parte.
Está fraco.
Deixa-me ver se eu consigo. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
As I was saying, the radio stations or the group of radio stations that I am here representing, it's from the Ashbra Media Group, a company that was started about 10 years ago. I also, Anthony, knew your Joaquim Esteves, and I believe someone else from your family, Debbie Ambrosinha, which was the manager from KRVE, and that's where I started it in California, was at KRVE. And from there, we worked at Radio Club Português, KATV, KSQQ, KLBS. And 10 years ago, Radio Portugal USA started, initially as a hobby, but all of a sudden it became more than a hobby because our goal was always to get a place where we could get the majority of independent producers together. And so far we have been able to accomplish. Today we have programs not only from independent producers in California, but also on the East Coast. And we're reaching out to outside the United States. We have an online radio station down in Terceira and one down in St. George. So, and outside of that, live streaming was also one of my passions. And I started doing live streaming first at the church, Our Lady of Assumption in Turlock, and the carnivals, etc. And today we decided to open the Televisão Portuguesa de California, and it's not on the air 24/7 because we do not have the funds and we do not have the staff that could do it. But whenever there's something of interest that requires us to be present, we are present. So that's the media company that I'm representing here today, and I thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. Just to show you that we are not just looking towards the past, in traditional media. If you look at our list, we have 3 people associated with podcasts. And the next person is Joseph Rocha from a very interesting name, podcast. We all understand it. Cala a boca.
Cala a boca, yes. Hi, my name is Joseph Rocha, or Rocha if you're American speaking. I started Cala a Boca with a couple of friends of mine, lifelong buddies, Luis Rebel and Manuel Coya. We're located in Tulare, California. And we started this podcast, we're in our 4th season now, so it had to have been, 2017, 2016, something around there. We're on 4 years of it. And the entire purpose of it was we like to hang out and talk to each other and have a good time. And we love the Portuguese community. So why not have a marriage between the two and sit around talking, discussing current events in the Portuguese community, history of Portuguese culture, and how things have translated from the old country to the US, some of the old Portuguese history. We've touched on Camões, we did Dom Afonso Henriques, we talked about the navigation and exploration. We talk about Carnaval, we talk about prominent historical figures and like nowadays historical figures like Cristiano Ronaldo, José Malhoa. We like to discuss about all these things. And I wanted to back on something that Angela said, that we should get the podcasts to have a little bit more prominence now. I think they are gaining in popularity, and they should in the Portuguese community as well. Our show has been heard all over the United States. I think we're missing 2 states to have a clean sweep across the board. We've been downloaded in all 6 major continents. So the support from that and the activity and the reach has been outstanding. We plan on getting into, we've dabbled a little bit in YouTube content with creating some silly videos that encapsulate kind of Portuguese kids style videos. We've done interview series with Carnaval leaders, with local Portuguese businesses as well. And the entire name for Cala a Boca is, when you get 3 Portuguese people in a room, they don't shut up. So we talk over each other, and we thought that was kind of funny, play on words to what we're doing and just yapping on about stuff. So that's me. I'm pleased to be here, pleasure to be here, and an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. The next person, we all know him. He reminds me of that song by Frank Sinatra, I Did It My Way. He goes on, he enumerates all the things that he's been. Diniz has been a teacher, a writer, a community leader, a radio personality, sometimes a troublemaker. The great Diniz Borges. He does it his way.
I better not say anything else after that introduction, but thank you all, and thank you all for taking, thanks to Luis for moderating, as I said, and thank you all for accepting the invitation to be here today. Just real quick, my history in radio started many years ago, and some of you were not born, so it was in quite a few of you actually. As I look around, it started in 1976, so that tells you how long that was. I was 18 years old. It was actually in end of 1975 when a friend of mine had a radio program here, one of those 60 that Luis mentioned, and I was asked to relieve him, as we would say it, while he went to the Azores for 2 weeks. And I kind of enjoyed it. I didn't know what I was doing, but I did it anyway. And about 6 months later, at the age of 18, I had to, I became a broadcaster with a program called Voz do Imigrante Português. That actually began at that time, and I was just getting my citizenship papers, just to let you know. So when I went to my friend, Manuel Simões was his name, had his radio program, and when I went to substitute him, I couldn't work the board, and I liked that because I liked touching all those buttons and everything else. Before they were real buttons, they were just like, analog system, but I couldn't be on the board because you had to be a U.S. citizen to be on the board at that time because of the we're talking, Cold War stuff. And so, so when I was 18, I had my citizenship paper already, and I got to do that. So I've been involved in Portuguese radio and newspapers for ever since then, probably too long. And and also the Portuguese television program, Os Portugueses no Val, that I did for almost 30 years. It's been 30 years in January. Unfortunately, the station, the Catholic station in Fresno, turned off its image and its sound, and so it closed up, and so did the program after almost 30 years. I had been involved in radio all this time, and of course had dabbled in newspapers and things like that. And as my wife keeps on reminding me, lost a lot of money. And that is the truth. The Portuguese-American Hour is what I'm representing today. It was a project that just started we're almost a year old. So there was a radio station in Fresno, KGST, AM 1600. It was actually the first Spanish radio station in California in the 1960s. Everyone said the guy was crazy to start a Spanish language radio station, and today he owns, I believe that Lotus now owns 1,400 and some odd radio stations throughout the United States, and not just Spanish, obviously. And they had been Spanish, but there's a lot of competition, so they decided to do this multicultural new format that they've started. So there is it's all in English, other than, of course, the Spanish that still exists in the morning and the evening, but it's all in English and talking about different communities. So there's representation there's an Armenian program, there's a Hmong program, there is an Arabic program, there is a African-American program, there's an Hispanic program in Spanish, and of course, and one in English. And then there's us, and we are daily 4 to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday. We focus on the Portuguese-American community. It's put forth by the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute at Fresno State, so that's the reason why I do it. They asked us if we would do it. It'd be an outlet for what we do, but we discuss everything related to the Portuguese-American world. We have had some of you already as guests on the program, and basically what we do for an hour, we play very little music, and we just talk about the Portuguese-American community, and there's always a segment about the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute. A little bit as I end, just to let you know that it's a very special year for radio in California, because according to the research done by Dr. Eduardo Meillon Dias, we are celebrating a century of Portuguese radio in California. So the first Portuguese radio program went on the air with a gentleman by the name of José Vitorino, an immigrant from the island of Terceira, who had been here just a couple of years. And this is before radio was really established. These were called what we termed in the Azores years ago, when after the revolution, lots of radio stations popped up. We called them pirate radios. So these were radio stations that weren't officialized yet by the U.S. government, because radio dates around to 1920 to the first official radio stations. And he didn't, the curious thing about it is he did not know how to read or write. He was illiterate. But he knew how to speak Portuguese, and he knew how to sell advertising, and he knew how to get people to listen to him. And he started a program on June 10th, which is, as you all know, Dia de Portugal, called Vasco da Gama. It only existed for a couple of years, but it was the first Portuguese radio program in California. So it's kind of special to be doing this as we celebrate Portuguese media and celebrating the 100th anniversary of Portuguese radio in California. And lastly, I also too know, as I mentioned, Mr. Schiff. So just so I wouldn't be left out, Anthony, everybody talked about Schiff. Joseph didn't, because he's the only one that doesn't remember that name. Obviously doesn't know that name. But when I was a Portuguese young man in 1976, when I started my program, my first festa that I went, because we would all go from festa to festa representing each other. The Portuguese festa at the time was an automatic success, because you always had like 25 or 30 couples, so 50 people at least from all the radio programs, because we made it a point to go to these. And I made a point to go. My first festa at the age of 19, my wife and I were dating. We had to take someone else along because they didn't trust us. That's how parents were back then. And we went to the Newark Pavilion. And I'll never forget. I mean, I was just mesmerized. And I said to my wife, I want to do what this man does. I never did. I mean, I've never been able to have. I had a festa like a year later, and I was very lucky. I had 450 people at the TDS Hall. But, as Joaquin Stives was able to get, there were over 5,000 people in the Newark pavilions around, the halls and everything, at different times. It was just amazingly done. What an inspiration he was to all of us.
Thanks, Diniz. And now Anthony Stives. Speaking of Stives.
No pressure. No pressure at all.
No. Let's see if you can measure up.
Yeah, I think this is what Nicolas Cage probably felt like when people were saying, "Aren't you Francis Ford Coppola's nephew?" Yes, I am. No, thank you. He is. I can hear my dad correcting. He's a cousin. He is my cousin along the line. But still had an impact on our entire family with what he was able to do with our culture and radio. Yes, my name is Anthony Esteves, for those without the Portuguese in their blood. I have been part of the Capeless Crusaders podcast since 2014. We created it then, which is a focus on all things comic books and the movies and TV shows and other products that they spawn. It was me and a few coworkers of mine when we all worked together at Apple in Sacramento. And after that, aside from having acted in high school, I had always had these ideas of writing. I've been writing screenplays and scripts, and a few of them involved Portuguese history, from as far back as Variathus, when we were just a bunch of Celts fighting the Romans, to Nuno Alves Pereira, to Peter Francisco, and to Aristide de Sousa Mendes. And I had this point where I was like, it's going to be really difficult to write all these screenplays I want, not just the Portuguese ones. So I was trying to think of a way to tell these tales. And I thought, well, why not a podcast? I've already done this podcast. Why not do a podcast based on history and figures in history and moments in history? So I decided to make Based on a True Journey, which is at truejourneypod.com and also available on your podcast apps. And I basically tell the tale of certain historical moments or figures. And the first episode was, of course, Aristide de Sousa Mendes, the insubordinate consul, as I call him. And I do have future ideas from Peter Francisco to how the Malasada made it to Hawaii and how the Portuguese-Hawaiian connection that happens there. This brief side note, if I am ever to start making a career as a screenwriter and the Aristide de Sousa Mendes story gets told, I would love to talk to Tom Hanks as being Aristide de Sousa Mendes. I'm just saying, we're going right for the Oscar. We're going right for the Oscar and having Tom Hanks play him.
Thank you, Anthony. Now that we all know each other, let's start some engaging, pertinent discussion. And of course, seriously, there's nothing more pertinent nowadays than this pandemic. And I share Miguel's thoughts on the seriousness of what's going on and how this pandemic is spreading all the way, including to the White House. And our thoughts go to everyone who's suffering from this terrible, terrible pandemic. So first question to each one of you is, how has your media outlet adapted in these pandemic times? What has changed? What innovations have you done? So how have you adapted, you and your media outlet? How have you changed? How have you adapted? What innovations have you come up with in order to answer the challenges of the present times? So we'll start with David Vieira.
Yeah, it's interesting times we live in. As far as the radio station, the commercial radio stations are concerned, we have payrolls, we have people to pay. And that becomes really difficult when businesses are suffering, when our Portuguese organizations are suffering, since advertising is down across the board, with both our businesses and our organizations. Some businesses will not survive, some organizations will not survive, unfortunately. That's my opinion. What we've done, what we've had to do to keep going, we've had a couple things fall in our lap, a few dollars here and there. The census, for instance, census campaign called us up and wanted to spend some money on advertising in mid-September for 2 weeks. And I guess that campaign ended. Also, PG&E with the wildfires, they chipped in with, not the wildfires, but the whole El Diablo wind, Mount Diablo winds and all that stuff. When you get high humidity and high heat and the winds start blowing offshore, the PSPS campaign, public safety power shutoffs. So, a couple things fall in your lap, which is nice, but otherwise it's kind of hard to break even. Some of the organizations have continued to advertise. They're still carrying on with Zoom or Facebook Live or live stream festivals. There's some going on right now. Our Lady of Fatima, for instance, and then Asunción also, I believe, did back in August. So, that's a little bit of money with the sponsors, but, those people and people, some citizens, but typically business people. And if their businesses aren't doing well, they can't sponsor, or they can't sponsor as much as they would have in good times. So there have been no layoffs or reduction of hours at the stations. We're eating it. Gratefully, there's a little bit of a cushion there, but that only goes so far. And I'm not on the business end. Full disclosure, my father is in charge of the business end. I take care of the technology, of which there's a lot. But ultimately, it's his decisions, and so far, it's he loves the community and loves providing this service to the community, and he'll continue to do so as long as he can stomach the losses.
Thank you, David. Miguel, how do you, what has changed? How have you adapted at the Portuguese Tribune?
Similar challenges, like David mentioned, for the radio station. So obviously, for those of you who follow the Portuguese Tribune, there's some seasonality to the publication. So when you start looking at the spring through the mid-fall, a lot of our advertising comes from the Portuguese events, right? The Portuguese festivals especially. Obviously, all of those got canceled. So that's basically a hole in terms of income coming in. And so different things that we could have looked at. We could have looked at suspending the publication altogether. We could have looked at going to a monthly publication instead of a bi-weekly publication. We could have reduced the number of pages. We could have gone to just black and white, because obviously printing in color is way too much more expensive than black and white. We did none of that, because again, we feel that as the only newspaper on the West Coast, that it's also our responsibility to be there for the community. And besides that, what we found is interesting cases. So we usually focus on interviews and getting to know talented individuals within our communities, usually starting in the fall through the winter months. Well, we've been doing that since March, right? So we did that. And in addition to that, because again, the community is suffering from a health perspective and obviously from a financial perspective, we've made the Portuguese Tribune, the online version, available for free during the entire pandemic. So since March that we've had our newspaper available, you can browse through the entire copy. You have full access to the current edition for free on our website. So it's our way to contribute as well to the community. We've, similar to David, we've come across different advertisers that came to us and said, I need space in the newspaper. So those have been really advantageous for us, obviously, during this time. But as David also mentioned, we're not breaking even at this moment. But we do think that there's a period beyond the pandemic. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But I think right now our biggest effort is really to get talented Portuguese Americans to be known amongst the community, to really be there for the community, so that hopefully the community will be there for us at the end of this pandemic period.
Thank you, Miguel. Manuel Aguiar, RTA Artesia. How has RTA Artesia adapted, changed due to the pandemic?
Maintaining a TV station, I feel like Miguel said, and also David, the same thing. We all kind of share the same worries. Doing TV, it's not easy because we get most of our donations from our Portuguese organizations. When we do go out and cover their events, they normally know what we do because we're a group of voluntaries. They give us a donation. We don't ask, we don't charge. We just basically ask them to give us whatever they can. And then we have our Portuguese community and other communities around us that help us financially with donations during the year. But as we know at this time with the pandemic, the way it's going, especially LA County is one of the highest in California. So it's very scary, not only for our Portuguese community, that we have a lot of people at home not working at this time. So we kind of fail on donations. We just canceled 2 huge events that we normally fundraise for Radio TV Artesia. And actually one, it's due tomorrow. And in other words, we're actually doing an event tomorrow, to-go event, Portuguese food. We're serving Portuguese food to go. But it's not even gonna help much because we normally, an event that we do, which is the crab dinner, it's a feast that we normally accommodate 2,000 people, and we're doing a to-go menu for about 300 or 400. So it makes a huge difference. So when it comes financially, we are struggling too. And then right now, we're not doing anything. We're not filming, we're not going out. The only thing we're doing live streaming. We're doing a couple programs on Facebook Live, but we don't leave the studio because it's dangerous for the volunteers, because we want to make sure none of the kids, none of our helpers gets the COVID, or it's kind of dangerous to be out there, especially in our area when we have the most cases in the state. So it hasn't been easy, and but we're doing everything we can to continue to do what we're doing. We're still alive. We could use more help, but at the same time, we're going to see what we can do.
Thank you very much. Angela, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that of all the media, the podcast would probably be the one least affected by the pandemic due to its nature. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. So when we started Politicus, it was started virtually and started, Diniz lives in Tulare, I live in the Bay Area. So there's no way we would ever be, not no way, but it's very rare that we're in the same location so frequently that we can, record the episodes in person. So literally every episode has always been virtual. The one thing that we did start doing differently during the pandemic was going live on Facebook. And that was not even with every episode, but with certain individuals that were okay with that, our interviewees. And that has helped us generate much more awareness, more viewers, more listeners. And, we operate differently than a newspaper or a TV station because we are a podcast of a nonprofit. And so for us, it's really about awareness and listenership and making people aware of the number of Portuguese-American elected officials or people who are in appointed positions. For example, we've interviewed people in the military that are Portuguese. We interviewed a mayor in Arizona, that no one probably would have ever known that he was Portuguese. They never listened to our podcast. So it's those kinds of things that it's a very different type of medium. I think there's a lot more that can be done with podcasts, and I think we'll probably get into that as we get down the conversation, because even when it comes to TV or the newspapers, I think there's a lot that can be done with the podcast format, and even getting transcripts of the format and turning that into content, and lessons learned from what I do with my clients, doing the same thing. So it's a very different medium for us. And I will say that also in the doing the Our Portuguese Table podcast with Maria Lawton, people love the accessibility of the podcast. So they can listen to it in their car. They can listen. We've had people say that they've listened to it while they're cooking. It's a very versatile. You don't have to sit and read something. You don't have to sit and watch something. They can just kind of pop it in, download it, and listen to it wherever they are. Maybe they're on a walk. Maybe they're exercising. It's a very versatile format. And so I think it would be great for a lot more media outlets as well as organizations to look to podcasting as a way to reach people. Now, of course, these are people that have access to podcast apps and have access to smartphones and things like that. So that means you're probably not reaching the older generations, the people who are not online, who are not on Facebook, that sort of thing. And that I think is still a challenge for our community. But if you're looking to reach a younger generation, podcasting is certainly an option, a really great option to explore. So like I said, the thing that's changed for us, specifically with Politicus, is that we have started broadcasting live on Facebook, and we do take the recordings and we post them to YouTube as well. We do get support from FLAD to fund the production of the podcast because we don't do it ourselves. We do have a production or a producer, if you will. He's based in Georgia, which is great, right? Because it's the nature of the times we live in. You know, Diniz is in Tulare, I'm in the Bay Area, our producer is in Georgia, the people we interview are all over the country. It facilitates being able to do things you never would have been able to do before. So that's how things have affected us.
Thank you, Angela. João Manuel Dias, you deal with radio and television. So what have you done to adapt to this pandemic situation? And if you could, maybe if it's possible, if you could compare and contrast the adaptations that you've had to do in the radio and on television.
Well, television pretty much came to a standstill because most of our programming was done through live streaming of Portuguese events and Portuguese festas. And since they were canceled, that pretty much came to a standstill. We took the opportunity on the radio side, though, to improve our equipment since it needed some overdue maintenance. So we acquired additional equipment. We also, just like everybody else, suffered as far as advertising is concerned. Some of our advertisers could not afford to continue to pay the spots and so forth. So we also suffer some losses there. Obviously, we suffer the losses of the remote transmissions and the live streaming events that we did. But so far, I think what it changed our programming. For instance, on my radio show, 1 hour every Monday, I was spending an entire hour playing music and giving the news of the community, events that were going to happen or that were happening and so forth. Since everything was canceled, forced me to change that format. And now I think I'm reaching out to a larger audience because I'm interviewing people on every Sunday. And actually, there's been very interesting conversations with some of these individuals. This Sunday, for instance, I'm going to have the opportunity to interview, and we're going to be talking about the pandemic as well. Founder of a radio station in the East Coast, Sr. Frank Batista. So there's going to be a very interesting conversation. So we took the opportunity, and another thing that we're doing to reach out and to make sure that everybody still understands that we're here, I'm doing a lot of mass mail outs and a lot of through social media, a lot of posts on social media, and also through marketing, mailing, emailing all my audience and so forth, doing a lot of that just to make sure that everybody understands. And we're lucky enough that we're pretty much, our audience has grown quite a bit. The latest stats that I looked at it, we're listed in 38 countries, which is very surprising. And sometimes we get a phone call that it's also very surprising. This week I received a phone call of a gentleman that it's in Maryland that used to be a radio DJ in New York for a rock station that listens to Radio Portugal USA. And actually we spent about 45 minutes and I might invite him to be one of my guests in the near future. So I think we took the approach, we can't do anything about the festas out there. We can't do anything about, what we need to do is help those small sponsors that cannot afford, perhaps come up with different packages for them that they will stay on or bring, build that loyalty with us. And as the same token, try to expand it out of our audience by reaching out to everybody via email and so forth about our programming and about what we're doing. And so far, it's been working pretty well.
Thank you very much. Joseph Rocha, has the pandemic affected your podcast?
In a sense, no. In a general sense, not really. Much like Angela said, the cost of entry for podcasting is relatively low. I think we pay maybe $20 a month to do the hosting. We do all the producing and editing in-house. And we're just a group of friends who like to do it. So we're not really looking at it to make returns or profits. We do have a couple sponsors and supporters who pledge monthly to help keep the show on the air. And we use those funds just to keep the show going. Where it did really affect us was at the beginning of every year, we set out a schedule of what events are going to be around locally that we can cover. So we did the Carnaval reviews, which we do every year, and it's one of our most popular episodes. We were planning on interviewing some local prominent Portuguese members of our community. And since all the festas have stopped, we had to pretty much go back to the drawing board. And we refocused our views into talking more about the historical aspects of the Portuguese culture, of Portuguese history, some prominent Portuguese figures. We talked about broad concepts like what our festa is going to look like after this pandemic is over, stuff like that. But outside of that, really hasn't affected us. We have our own private studio where we social distance. We all have our own equipment that we don't interchange. But to piggyback on something that Angela said that was really interesting is that podcasts and social media is definitely the way to reach a more youthful audience. Pretty much just for the versatility of the podcasts. You can get it on demand. You don't have to tune in at a specific time or record it, set a DVR. Most kids my age, I say kids, most people my age don't even do DVR or TV. Everything's on demand, Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, all that stuff, Spotify. So they're used to podcasts. And if you have a more traditional media, so say you're doing broadcast radio, a lot of radio stations, American radio stations, are taking those transcripts and just putting them onto podcast format to make it more readily accessible to the youth. And I think that's a great idea to help reach more people in my generation and even the generation that's coming after me to be more immersed in the Portuguese culture and Portuguese media.
Thanks, Joseph. Diniz. Are you there, Diniz? Diniz Borges?
I'm here. I just had to unmute myself. I was trying to do three things at once. At my age, it takes a little bit of time. It has affected the Portuguese-American Hour in the aspect that, of course, we cannot have any of the live interviews around the area that we'd like to have. People like still to come to a radio station, and if they're from the Fresno area, they would normally travel, even if they're from Tulare, which is 45 minutes from Fresno, or up north, Madeira, Merced. They'd like to travel to the radio station for an interview. So obviously, we're not doing anything live with people there. So it has to be on the phone. It also has changed some of the things that were going to be built upon this, because the radio station thought it would be a little bit of a profit making a program, and they haven't made a penny. They don't even pay me. I do it for free as a service of the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute. That's the idea, but they were thinking that they would commercialize. I mean, it's 1 hour on an AM radio station, and that has a history in the valley, of 60 some years. So they thought they would be able to commercialize it. They have not been able to do it as well as they could. They have like 2 or 3 sponsors that also sponsor some of the other programs as well. But they thought they would be reaching out to the Portuguese-American community sponsorships, some of the larger companies and everything else. But most of them have said, we'll wait, until what happens after the pandemic. So it has affected, I think, what the radio station could do with it. They have a nice cushion because they have 7 radio stations in that same building that are owned by the same people. So if one doesn't make money, the other ones are doing a little bit better. And so they're in this process to do this for about 2.5 to 3 years at least, and see how it goes. So we'll see. They're pleased with the program because obviously they're not paying for the so-called talent. I don't have any, but whatever I do. And so they're not paying, for the person who does the show. It is an agreement that we have that we can promote PBBI. That's what we're interested in. So that cuts their costs a little bit, but we do have a producer, we do have someone on the technical stuff. And to kind of piggyback on what folks were saying about and in the long run, it is a commercial radio station, just like David said. And so if they can't commercialize this, during a certain amount of time, they're going to say, hey, thanks for your service, adios amigo, so it's going to happen if they're not able to commercial. I'm not commercializing it. I don't have nothing to do with it. I told them that I would, give them some leads, but that's all where my responsibilities end. However, we'd like to continue with this experience. To piggyback what Joseph and Angela said, and I'm sure Anthony will touch on the same thing, we find that a lot of our listeners are not on the traditional AM radio. They're on the podcast as well, because they're doing that. They put it online, and now they're going to put it on podcast services as well. So all of the programs are archived in our channel, in our online station, www.multicultural1600am.com. That's a plug. And so we find that a lot of the listeners are listening that route. Okay. They'll listen to it in their car, wherever they're at. And even, in traditional radio, I mean, just to end it, I promoted it and I still do a little bit with my students, but especially when I was doing live classes. And I had a student here not too long ago, last semester, told me, I listened to the podcast. I listened to the show. It was quite interesting. Thank you. And actually, it was a show that I interviewed Miguel Avila. So Miguel is always interesting. And they said, I didn't even know there was a Portuguese, newspaper and, this kind of stuff. And I knew he lived in Madeira, north of Madeira, almost actually in that Atwater area. And so for those of you that's a little bit from Fresno. And I said, and how was the reception? And he says, I said, were you in your car? He says, yeah, I was in my car. I said, how was the reception? And he said, reception was great. You could listen to it fine. There's no, no noises, nothing. And he said, yeah. And I said, wow, I didn't know it was that great up there. He said, well, what do you mean? And I can listen anywhere. And I said, well, you said you were listening to your car. I said, yeah, on my phone. It was playing, I said, well, do you actually know that there's a little button there, that has a radio? And so even people on their car, nowadays, it seems like the podcasts, the radio app, they've told me also that their radio app that they have has a lot more listeners than their normal radio station on some of the programs. And so there's all of these things that are happening. It has affected us in the aspect that I don't think if they will continue this project, because it's 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, if they can commercialize it, and they haven't been able to do that.
Thanks, Diniz. Anthony.
Yeah, regarding podcasts, one of the outlets that I'm a part of, Latino Review Media, which is basically covering all entertainment news in the country. They have been we've been finding it easier to actually interview or have small interviews with actors and entertainers now, because they're not really doing much right now. So a Zoom call to an actor or writer is easier now once we have a connection with their publicist or their agent or what have you. Recently, we actually got to sit down and talk to Joaquim de Almeida. Sadly, I didn't get to talk to him because I would have nerded out the entire time while talking to him. But he sat down and talked about Fatima when he was with that website. And regarding the Capeless Crusaders, we've been lucky enough to be partnered under the banner of the Nerd On podcast family in Southern California. So what would usually be is where we would get together at one location, record together through GarageBand. We now record from home using Zoom as a visual aid, and GarageBand recording our own separate tracks and then sending it to our producer Nerd On, and he puts it all together, and there's our episode. So it hasn't really stopped us from doing what we do, just we've adapted to it, where we're not across the table from each other, we're looking at the screen with each other and doing what we've always been doing. It does give us more time to review certain comic books or certain TV shows or movies or themes we have, because now we can find time to actually sit home and watch it, although some of those programs I can't have my kids watch. Regarding Based on a True Journey, my second season had sort of a change to it, because right when I was about to start doing something, I was going to focus more on pandemic, and the George Floyd incident occurred. And that changed my entire approach to the beginning of that season, and where instead of me telling a narration, I decided to have 4 of my close friends who have suffered their own injustices give their stories. And I kind of changed my podcast for that instance, just because I felt it was time for me to, cala minha boca and let them speak their truth and what they've gone through. So my personal podcast took a little bit of a turn when that happened, still working on getting my episodes written from there. But otherwise, with K+ Crusaders and Latino Review Media, it's been a change to, instead of being across from someone, but using Zoom, but otherwise still being able to do what we do, get our work out there, and have actually, in some cases, more access to certain individuals that we wouldn't have had access to before because they're free at the moment.
Thanks, Anthony. Now, I would like you to turn the page, so to speak, and have a beautiful thought. And it is that I want you to imagine that the pandemic is over, that we can go anywhere, we can do all the things we used to do, give our friends a hug, anything we want. Remember these old days. I want you to turn the page. Pandemic is over. How do you see your media outlet and the community in general post-pandemic? Okay, no more pandemic now. How do you see your media and the community? Will some of the adaptations for the pandemic continue? Or will you go back to the way things were before? So, post-pandemic. David.
Well, post-pandemic, I mean, these are business decisions, and I don't pretend to speak for my father. I'm sure he'd like things to go back the way they were. However, there have been changes. I mean, things have changed during the pandemic. A lot more FaceTime is being, well, not FaceTime, but rather Facebook, live stream, other services, organizations, churches have learned how to use these technologies, and frankly, they'll be competing for people's eyes and ears with the traditional media outlets. So from that perspective, I don't know that we can go back to the way things were before. After the pandemic, and this isn't the pandemic actually, but it's just the fact that contrary to the great work that Zé Luís and his peers have done in the schools, the number of Portuguese speakers in our community are dwindling. So how do you engage kids? And when I say kids, I mean people the age of my children who are in their 30s. How do you engage them when they don't speak Portuguese well enough to be engaged? It's tough. So Portuguese media is facing more than just the pandemic issues. It's really suffering, or will be suffering, an existential challenge across the board. And frankly, my background is software engineering, so I'm really not a radio person. I'm a technologist, if anything, both software and hardware when I have to. But I defer to my 83-year-old father because he prefers it that way. He's the boss, and it's his call as far as how we operate after the pandemic. He's done fine for 40 some, almost 50 years. But these are challenges. These are generational challenges with this pandemic. So, hey, it's a whole lot of unknown.
Thanks, David. Could it be, David, that with the changes in the population, the demographics and all that, maybe radio stations, Portuguese radio stations go to a mixed programming of English and Portuguese to attract the younger kids?
There are a lot of things that can be tried, but anyway, I'm thinking that problem might have to fall to me and my brother. I hope not, but we'll see.
Thank you. Miguel.
So interesting commentary there about the language, right? So we need to realize where we are from a community perspective. And that's something that in the Portuguese Tribune we've been migrating quite a bit over the last couple of decades. There needs to be an English presence besides having a Portuguese presence. We can't have just one or just the other. I think talking about the pandemic, I think we're going to be kidding ourselves if we think that when the pandemic ends, when there's a vaccine, when there's better treatment, that we're going to go exactly to what it used to be in February of this year. Nothing is going to be the same in the Portuguese community. And you've had several panels throughout this week talking about what the impact may be. So one of the things that I wanted to point out is, I think that the community, even before the pandemic, was somewhat stagnant. Things needed to be shaken up a little bit, okay? We can't have exactly the same things. We always done it the same way, okay? And to be honest with you, as we were publishing things, and obviously when we're getting ads to publish certain events, obviously we need to do that, right? Because it's, again, we need the income to come in, but it's too repetitive. And so getting back to less organizations, but more focused organizations may not be a bad thing. So I think we need to look at how do we recreate ourselves as a community? How do we reinvent ourselves as a community and as a media outlet as well, right? So we need to look at collaboration across, things were mentioned here about podcasts. And I mean, I've never had so much collaboration with our newspaper as we've had since the pandemic started. Whether it's being invited to Manuel's TV program, SIC Internacional, FTP, radio stations and so forth. So I think we need to continue to do that. And not just on the West Coast, we need to do that across the US and beyond. The other thing that I would say is, a Portuguese journalist or a journalist from Portugal comes here, spends 5 minutes in California, and all of a sudden he's an expert, he or she is an expert on our communities. We need to have a different conversation. We're the ones who understand this community. So those journalists, instead of interviewing the same 2 or 3 people and getting the same answers all the time, they need to reach out to us, those of us in the media, to really speak what the reality is in this state and in the US. So I'm seeing a lot more of that happening. And I hope that doesn't stop, in a post-pandemic world. But I do think that there's a lot of reflection we need to do as a community, and the media outlets will obviously come along for the ride. But we have to do it in a bilingual way. There's no other way.
Thanks, Miguel. Well, no, again, what do you see post-pandemic with the RTA Artesia?
When we talk about nonprofit organizations, it's a lot harder to get the English part in our programming. We've had the few English programs in our station, but they don't last because the dedication is not there as much as we do, the ones that are from the first generation. So it's not easy. They do it well, but then they get tired after a while, and they have different cultures, and they live with different cultures, with the American, with the Portuguese, and everything else around them, and sometimes I don't have enough time to dedicate fully especially to a TV station. But after pandemic, I'm going to say the same thing. We don't know. We don't have no idea. We don't even know when this is going to end after the pandemic. It's going to be hard to get back to normal, or even to get back to normal. I don't even know if we'll ever get back to normal when it comes to the TV stations, radio stations, whatever. I feel for the organizations we have around us, like the RTGDS and Paramount and Chino, the ones that are more in the Southern California and San Diego, we're all suffering at this point. We don't know, because our first generation it has been said here that our first generation, it's minimizing daily by daily, and I really don't know what's going to be what's going to happen in the future. But what I can say is that me as myself, I've been on radio TV Artesia for the last 25 years. It's been a long time. And it's not that I'm getting tired, but I think I'm not able to do the work because doing TV, it's not easy anymore because technology, it's growing by day. And there's a lot of things today that I don't even know how to do it because of the new technology that we have. So we need new people, new faces, new bodies, and especially the younger kids. I'm 100% to have both languages on TV. But for us, as the Southern California, for our Portuguese community, it's not easy. It hasn't been easy, but I've tried and I'm continuing to try and I will continue to try. But we'll see what's going to happen.
Thank you. Angela, what do you see post-pandemic in your podcast?
So, I mean, in general, you know, Palcus has evolved tremendously over the last 5 years. We saw a need to evolve and change to meet the needs of the national community. We're not focusing on just one state. So we've introduced a lot of different programs. So we're used to change and we're used to adapting. Post-pandemic, I see us continuing with doing things virtually. Also, the nature of our organization is virtual. All of our directors are in different states. We don't really have a home office, and yet we're still able to accomplish a lot. The one thing that I think has really helped us is that we went out to the community and said, what's your concern? What do you worry about? Where would you like to see efforts and funds invested? And so if you look at the results from our 2018 Palcus Index survey, we did do a second one and the results will be published soon. But if you look at the 2018 results, despite the fact that fewer and fewer people are speaking Portuguese, maintaining the language is actually one of the biggest priorities of our community, and maintaining the connection to the community and our heritage and our festas and other traditions is a big concern of the community. But the community is also changing. So what does that mean? If the current festas aren't doing it, if the current celebrations aren't doing it, then what is going to help bring people back into the fold and bring young people back into the fold? And I think our organizations, whether it's festas, halls, fraternals, media, I think across the board, we need to ask people what they want to see and what is the need that needs to be served, and not pretend like we, in our own little bubble, in our own little boards, know what the community wants just based on our own opinions. We have to actually put the question out there to the community to say, what do you want us to do? What would you like to see? And there's lots of ideas out there. I mean, I emailed Miguel and Lucia the other day to say, hey, I would love to read every article in your paper. I don't have time to read anymore. So can you put your articles in a podcast form? Just have whoever's writing your article, just have them recorded into a phone, put it on a podcast, and I'll listen to it while I'm driving. Guaranteed, I would consume much more of the Portuguese Tribune's content if it was on audio than if it was written. And the thing I think people need to get away from is the idea that all of these kinds of things are expensive. And, oh, we can't do it, we don't have the resources. You would be really surprised that how easily and cost effectively these things can be done. And I bet you if you've got some young volunteers to do this for you, they would jump at the opportunity to do it. Offer virtual internships. So that's something that Palcus did, is we offered some virtual internships this year to help us with some things that we needed. And we've had 4 virtual interns over the summer, and even we have 2 more now. And it's been hugely successful. And these are all kids in college. One was actually in high school. And so I think people are stuck at home. They want to find something to do. People do have the interest to get involved. They just might see the traditional stuff as being, I don't want to do that. I want to do something different. I want to do something new. And so, Diniz just said something in a past podcast, in a past webinar, I think it was on Sunday, the one that we did, that this pandemic is an opportunity for us to innovate and do new things and try new things. And if you try it and it doesn't work, oh well, you go back to what you're doing, you try something else. But this is giving all of us an opportunity and an excuse to try something new and different and innovate and not be afraid to change. So that's kind of where we're going. I mean, again, Palcus and Politicus, you're just going to continue to see more online stuff from us because, again, that's just the nature of how we've been doing things. We have a virtual conference coming up in October, very similar to this one that Luzo is doing, but ours is really promoted to be national, has a different focus, business opportunities for Portuguese Americans to go, invest in Portugal. But yeah, I mean, I think you're just going to continue to see more and more of things virtual.
Angela, I like your idea. Multimedia, newspaper with audio. That's innovative. You know, I'm a listener. I'm more of a listener than I'm a visual learner. I would love to have that. João Manuel Dias.
Well, post-pandemic, I think a lot of things are going to change. I think the way that the Portuguese community was running before the pandemic was already putting a strain, special on the youth, where they didn't want to participate anymore on these festas because it was always the same thing over and over and over, okay? And you can see on the halls, the people that are running the halls and so forth, they're always the same people. There's never new people. And when you see that, that's a signal that nobody's getting involved on it. So this pandemic, I think post-pandemic, is going to force these individuals to start thinking outside of the box and doing things differently in order to attract additional people. And I agree with you folks. I've been trying to get people, young folks that want to do a radio program in English and play Portuguese music. It's open. If you guys want to do that, let me say here, I have plenty of hours. Anybody that wants to do it, I'll help them set it up and do it, because that's the way we need to go. We need to realize that it has to be multi-language. It cannot be just Portuguese, okay? So we have, like Angela says, we have to think outside the box and innovate. We have to look at other avenues. We have to try something different. And if it doesn't work, we can always go back to what we're doing. So I think a lot is going to change. Yes, it's going to give us some opportunities for those of us that have the enthusiasm and have the ability to look at those opportunities. It's going to give us additional opportunities here as far as revenue coming into a media group like mine. But it has to change. And I think we're going to be very surprised how the change is going to happen. And I know that we're all Portuguese and Portuguese are fighters. And I think that they'll embrace the change and move forward.
Thank you. Joseph, what's going to happen to Cala Boca after the pandemic?
So in terms of Cala Boca, I don't think much is going to change post. We may utilize some of these new technologies to help facilitate the production of our podcast and our services and our voice. In terms of a return to normalcy, as a businessman myself, I listen to a lot of business podcasts, and pretty much every leader in business has said there is not going to be a normal as we knew it before, because now that people are so used to this new technology, Zoom meetings, virtual, it's become so much more accessible, and the technology has evolved so rapidly. Even when everything's back to normal, there's still going to be hints of this lingering around. So I don't think there is a normal coming back. It's going to be a new normal and something that we're all going to have to adapt to and make changes to. And I think the biggest thing that we have to do as media outlets, but just as the Portuguese community, is really reinforce the festas. Some, not to be bleak, but some may never come back just because of loss of revenue, loss of enthusiasm. People have been a year out of festas, a year out of participation. They might say, hey, we like that, and we're never coming back. And then some other areas, bigger areas like San Jose, Artesia, Turlock areas, they might there might be a resurgence of people that say, we've been out for too long, let's go back gung-ho, let's all go help and support the community. But the smaller ones that were already on the decline, I think they're the ones that are the most in danger. They're the ones who have that first generation that have been holding on to that for a thread. And I've made it a part of my, Portuguese community has been a big part of my life. I've been involved with it since I've been 2 years old, dragged along with my parents to everything. Carnaval being the main thing that I really love, the band being second most in that regards, and the festas right there up on that list, rounding off the top three. But yeah, like many people have said, there needs to be new ideas. If anyone's listened to my show, they know that I am a huge traditionalist. I love the way that we have maintained a glimpse and a snapshot of what it was like in my grandpa's time. But if we go back to Terceira or the old country, we see that the festas there have evolved drastically. It's not the same way. They're not doing things the same over there as we do over here. And I don't mean we need to do a complete rehab on the way we do things. I do like to see that traditional aspect because it's that glimpse into what my parents and grandparents have experienced. But there does need to be some more modification. We need to have more youth, more people of my generation involved in boards, involved in helping out in the community events, helping out with the media. Shoot, anyone can do a podcast. It's cheap. It's next to free. You can even do it for free. Throw it up on YouTube, Facebook. Just record something. Go out there. Immerse yourselves into the culture, because if my generation does not keep things going, it will die out, unfortunately. And that's something that I don't want to see in my lifetime. Going back to the language, our podcast is in English. We talk about Portuguese things, but we're trying to reach the youth. We're trying to get them out. And the best, most effective way to do that is to speak their language. Even though 2/3 of Cala Boca does speak Portuguese, and the other third kind of so-so. He knows a couple words. So we could totally do that, but it defeats the purpose. We have to get the youth involved. If we have to go multilingual in our media content to get that outreach, to bring in that support and the new ideas and the new innovation using the new technologies, I think that's the way we have to go as a collective. And I really hope that I never see the Portuguese traditions and the Portuguese cultures die out.
Thanks, Joseph. Diniz.
Well, obviously, in that lots of has been said, and I don't want to try not to repeat anything. But when I began the Portuguese-American Hour almost a year ago, some of the biggest critics were people that I've known for a long time, because of my involvement has always been in Portuguese. Why are you doing this in English? And you're a Portuguese teacher, retired from high school, but now at a university. But exactly for the point that, first of all, that's what the opportunity was. It was given to me as a program in English. Do you want to do it? So I wasn't going to pass up the opportunity for PBBI's sake. And second of all, because of that, exactly what Joseph said. I mean, the younger generation, I've had thousands of students. Joseph was my student. And the students whose parents speak Portuguese and they speak at home in Portuguese, yeah, they can follow along a Portuguese podcast or read a Portuguese news article, etc. But those who only go to class, 1 hour a day and then, never hear Portuguese again, and then leave high school and never touch the Portuguese language again, they're never, they're not going to retain it. So if they're of Portuguese background, we want to reach them, we better do it in English. Ask how many people who are now 35 or 40 who took 2 or 3 years of algebra, how much algebra they remember. And so, that's just the way it is. If you don't practice a language, you lose. So I think exactly what Miguel also said, which is, if we look at the census at the 2001 that we have the numbers, and I always like to quote those numbers because that is what we have. There are around 350,000 Californians who identify as being a Portuguese background. According to the same data, 31,000 say they speak some Portuguese at home, some Portuguese at home. So there's 320,000 who don't speak it at all. And so if we want to move forward as vital parts of the community, we have to concentrate on that. obviously I don't, I'm not a proponent of closing everything that's Portuguese. The Portuguese media has done a tremendous job. We wouldn't have people speaking Portuguese today if it wasn't for the Portuguese radio programs of the 1960s and 70s. I can tell you that. People would have arrived here like I did in 68. If there was no Portuguese media, we would have just immersed in English and my parents would have learned English. And, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I'm not judging that, but that's what would have happened. The Portuguese media predates any Portuguese language school. They or any class at any high school, most colleges, a few colleges existed, and certainly the community schools. So it was the Portuguese media, especially the radio, that maintained the language alive that we still have today. David mentioned a really interesting thing, which is, when you go back to, is there a way to go back to post-pandemic where everything will be the same? Never, because as he mentioned the religious services, which is quite interesting. Only a few radio stations or television stations were broadcasting the Portuguese masses, okay? Here in Tulare, for example. Now they're on Facebook. So we don't have a Portuguese radio station here, unfortunately. We did. But now will they go back on the Portuguese radio station, especially if there's a cost, or will it just continue on Facebook or other media outlets? So there's that. There's that to compete. And then the other thing is, I think even the ones that exist, we need to think as Joseph mentioned, and Miguel and Manuel and João Manuel and everybody else, we need to think beyond how do we do what we've been doing to a younger generation. Angela and I do the podcast Politicus, and her and I have talked about this. Sometimes we do a podcast for 45 minutes. I said, people don't want to listen to it for that long. And, her and I have struggled with this because a lot of podcasts, people want to like a 20 minutes, 25 minutes. So the same thing we're doing on the Portuguese-American Hour. One of our issues is how do we take that hour and break it into different podcasts according to the different segments that would interest people. So the segment that I maintain, and thanks to Miguel, every 2 weeks, we might just put that on a separate thing, a conversation with the Portuguese Tribune. It's 19 minutes, and people can listen to it at their own time, and they don't have to listen to the whole entire show. So we have to think a little bit beyond the box, I believe, and I think that regular media has to adapt. And one of the things of our panel, of course, was, how do we look at the media and how do we bridge, with Portugal? And I think, and I've told this to my very good friend Euclides Alves and João Manuel Dias being the almighty president of the Diaspora Media Group. I think Diaspora Media Group has such an important role. And that is because they have listeners in all these countries. I think there's a new role for Portuguese radio at that level, and Portuguese television with Manuel Aguiar, and the Portuguese Tribune, of course, and the podcast, which is, let's have a segment where we're also selling the Portuguese community, in a marketing technique where we're selling the Portuguese community to the whole world. Exactly to say what Miguel mentioned earlier, which is, a journalist arrives from Portugal, is here 2.5 minutes, and knows more about the community than anything else. Miguel might remember that I had that conversation when he was, this is such a long time ago, when he was the youth director, him and Lucia, for one of the Luso-American Education Foundation conferences in San Jose. I don't remember the year, he probably does, and with an entity that had come from Portugal, from the Azores, to represent the government of the Azores. That's been happening forever, the Luso conference. And he had been here a day and a half, and he was telling me how the community is. And I mentioned to him, I said, boy, you're a pretty bright guy. I've been here 30-some years, and I don't even know how it is. And so it is this kind of stuff that sometimes we need to do. We're the specialists in the Portuguese-American community, so we have an obligation to now, instead of doing only radio for our people, especially the ones that is in Portuguese, maybe we want to do radio for the Portuguese-speaking world. Maybe we want to do radio for those who speak Portuguese, which is the official language of Angola and Mozambique, about what it is to be Portuguese in California. Because I think there's an interest in that. And I think we are the specialists. So I think there's an innovative field that we need to look at. We need to look at how we continue with the community, but how we can bridge to other communities. What Miguel has been doing with the interviews is a way to not only portray these Portuguese Americans in, from technology to ag for our community's sake, but also because the newspaper is online for other communities as well throughout the United States. Manuel Aguiar with his television now on the Facebook Live. It's an opportunity for people in Portugal to get to know how Artesia is or how the community is. So I think there's a market here for this. We just have to intertwine it to some of the things that we've been doing and tweaking it a little bit. I don't think we need to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but I think that we do need to move forward because young people, and I'll just close with this, some of you might know that Público, I know Miguel knows this and a couple other people here, Público has and José Luís, Público has started something called Público Global, which is kind of a service in English about what is going on in Portugal and the Portuguese. And it's just, you can read it in like 9.5 minutes. And my youngest son, who is, 38 years old, older than some of the young people on this panel. My youngest son, who's 38 years old, subscribes to it. And I told him, why don't you subscribe to the whole newspaper? He said, Dad, I don't have time. That 9.5 minute read is perfect. It's all I need to know about Portugal. It keeps me informed, and that's all I really need to know. And he said, and I would love a podcast the same way. Give me a 15-minute podcast, everything there is to be known about the Portuguese community, or give me 15-minute podcast of everything there is to be known that's happening that week in Portugal, and that'd be perfect for me. So that's the busy lives that people will continue after the pandemic. And so I think we need to be ready for it.
Great idea, Diniz. Anthony, finish up this question with your thoughts.
Yeah, in the late 90s, Steve Jobs and Apple came up with a simple campaign slogan that was 2 words: think different. And it wasn't a way of saying what was done in the past was wrong. It was saying there are new ways we can do things better, things easier. And when we get back to a point where we're reached our new normal, the way to get people back involved amongst what everything you have all said now is promoting the hell out of everything in our culture with all the outlets we now know exist to us. We have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have Instagram, whether it's Facebook Live, Instagram Live, what have you. Maybe sit down with people who are part of the festas and talk about what's coming up with festas this summer and fall. Talk about what's the history of it, how it got formed, how it was planned, because there's a lot of rich history that we don't put out there enough, in my opinion, that with the amount of information and technology that we have now, there's so much rich history when it comes to the Thornton Our Lady of Fatima Festa here that my grandfather was a part of. When it comes to Artesia, where my cousins live, and Artesia and Cerritos, that festa, the communities that are there, there's so much history we can put out there that can be seen by anyone, because we got to realize that there are people who are Portuguese who want to see our festas and our culture, and there's people who have no Portuguese blood, no Portuguese culture, but are interested in learning about other cultures. I have many friends of mine who have come to these festas who are just curious about what the Portuguese do. They go to Greek festivals, they go to Italian festivals, and they want to go to Portuguese festivals. And we got to open that up to them as well and find all the ways that we can get to them. Of course, it takes time. Of course, it takes some work to it. But the tools are there. Like Joseph said, you can make a podcast for free. Anchor is a free app that will put out your podcast to Apple, to Spotify, to Google, to all the organizations that are out there. Finding time to connect with actual existing radio and television stations where it could be a joint collaboration between a podcast and a radio station, a podcast and a TV station, to just draw up support for what's going on. And there's, losing train of thought. There's so many options we have that we aren't using at the moment that we can put out there, or not using enough. And for example, and whether it's focusing on, like, say, sports, my buddy Danny Pint here in Sacramento has the Sell a Song podcast, English-speaking podcast, focusing primarily on the Portuguese national soccer team and all the events coming up. My cousin Eric Vieira in Southern California, he goes by the Portuguese Hammer, and he's on an LA Galaxy podcast. So there is someone who is proud about being the Portuguese culture in an outlet that is not just primarily focused on Portuguese only. So it's a way of spreading the word about our culture, whether it's within our own Portuguese community or outside of it, and getting people interested in what we have.
Thank you. You know, the wealth of ideas in this panel is amazing. I mean, I'm just listening to you guys, and my brain is going all over the place. And unless Denise has some questions from the audience, this will be my last question to the panel. Okay, and I'd like us to concentrate on the younger generation, to bring it in. And I know some of you have touched on it. And I'm going to state the question, but then present some threads on that question. You follow any thread, any way that you like, you know, because there's a lot of aspects to this question. So regarding our young Portuguese Americans, what do you think the Portuguese-American media in English or Portuguese should do in a post-pandemic world to reach younger Portuguese Americans and to keep them engaged? So in the future, how do we, even now, how do we reach the younger generation? How we keep them engaged? Follow these threads. How important are the traditional outlets and the new platforms? How do we bridge the immigrant community and the second, third, fourth, and even fifth generations of Portuguese Americans who are much more mainstreamed than the immigrant community? Finally, what are some ideas and projects that you would like to see in the future in Portuguese American community media? So addressing the younger generation, what do you see, what ideas do you have, and take it any way you want. So we'll start with David.
Well, the traditional media, and we see this with radio, with traditional television, and even now with cable television, they are monolithic behemoths that are like an oil tanker that takes 5 miles. You got to know you want to turn left 5 miles before you need to turn left, because what happens is traditional media is saddled with a lot of regulations. And if we want to do a podcast, and we've thought about it. I mean, I'm a technology guy. The reporting on the music we might play in that podcast, we have to know how many people heard it, and pay royalties on that. Just like on the internet, and we are on the internet. We have been for 10 or 15 years, depending on which station you're talking about. Maybe longer. There's nothing I'd love better than to just let TuneIn handle our internet presence, because then I don't have to track, I don't have to do the monthly statistics, how many plays. There's a huge burden placed on traditional media of tracking for reasons of royalty payments, and that's fine. I mean, we're using music, we got to pay for it. I don't have a problem with that. The problem I have is these regulations are very cumbersome, and they're not easily circumvented, because then you get in trouble. And as a traditional radio station, you don't want to get in trouble, especially like next year, our license is coming up for renewal for KSQQ, I believe. And you don't want anything in your public file that somebody threw in there because you didn't pay them 3 cents for 2 plays or 50 plays of their song. So what are we going to do post-pandemic to engage the younger people? I don't know, because also we're going to alienate the older people. I mean, right now Father Antonio over here at Five Wounds is doing bilingual masses. You know how many calls we get of people pissed off at him because they say that 10:30 mass is Portuguese and needs to stay Portuguese? What do you do? It's tough. It's tough. And that button on that radio, on traditional radio, or on your phones, and we have people listening on their phones to our feed and our feed off of TuneIn. But once they flip the channel and they find the station and find something else they like better, let's not assume that these folks who are essentially monolingual don't have options. You know, they can listen to Spanish if they like, you know, the Spanish music. They've got, everybody has options. How do we appeal to those tastes? Well, we've had a good gig with monolingual Portuguese, and those folks are getting older. And every time the church bell rings out here, I live a block from Five Winds Church. Every time the church bell rings, that's one less listener. But it's actually more than one less listener. Diniz knows this very well. He's told me, you're losing the family. You're losing the family because that radio's not on because grandma's gone. And that radio that was in the garage or in the kitchen, people aren't casually listening to that. The kids aren't, the intermediate generation, the parents aren't. I don't have the answers. Like I said, I'm the guy who likes to write software and playing with computers. That's above my pay grade. It's not that I don't think about it, but you know, my dad runs the show, and you know, we've broached these topics from time to time. It's a tough sell, and I'm not a marketer, although I did do some technical marketing back in the day. It's tough. I don't have an answer. I mean, I wish I did.
Thank you, David, for your thoughts. Miguel, what's the Tribune going to do to attract young generation, to keep them, to engage them?
So let me give you some statistics. So when we got it online several years ago, almost a decade ago now, we looked at the demographics, and we ran a survey on the paper edition versus the online edition, and as well as social media, right? So the paper edition average age was 57. Online edition was 35. So when we looked at the distribution of those numbers, we saw that obviously we were now tapping into a much younger generation, right? We also have, similar to David, we have those people who complain, too much English, too much Portuguese. And so you can't please everybody. However, what technology nowadays allows us to do is, if there's an article in one language, the website will translate it for you. Not perfect translation, but if you really want to read it and get the sense of it, you will. So in terms of how do we attract, you know, younger generations, first of all, we can't forget about the older generation, right? Those are the steady subscribers we have, right? So as we're making these changes, we need to make sure we balance those out. Unfortunately, several years ago, when content was made free on the internet, it ruined a whole lot of more traditional media, right? However, now that things have evolved, people are now more used to paying for content, whether it's Netflix, Amazon Music, Apple Music, etc. Now people are now more used to paying for content. I think some of the more traditional media outlets can now get into that when 10, 15 years ago, it was totally impossible to do that. I think getting short snippets, whether it's audio or even, as Diniz mentioned, with Público and the Público Global, basically it's a newsletter that they send out with a summary of all the news. I think consumption really needs to be if you want to read a whole page column from one of our columnists, obviously more than welcome. Can I get to a point where I want to get the highlights of that column, right? The other challenge that we have, and I toss this out to all of you and encourage you, is the different points of view, right? We tried, to get people across the spectrum, and I'm talking political spectrum, right? Because that's a way to engage people as well. One thing that, to me, as the editor-in-chief of the Portuguese Tribune, that saddens me is people talk, nobody writes. So when they don't write back, complain, compliment, do whatever, right? Or give us a call if you don't want to write, that's fine. But if you look back at some of the editions, and Eduardo Zébio put some on his background, some old issues, do you see a way that the community was getting, and sometimes it was the editor-in-chief, and this, I'm talking specifically the Portuguese Tribune, João Brum, when it was the editor-in-chief, arguing about Tony Silveira, now the Reverend António Silveira, who was also a columnist in the newspaper. So there was a back and forth going on for several editions. So getting people engaged more than just being consumers and not being engaged. So I think definitely, and in terms of community, I would say we need to remember our past. We can't forget what we've done as a community, especially here in California. We need to celebrate our present. Whether it's a stagnant community, there's a lot of good things that happen, and that's what we tried to highlight as well. And then we need to create that future for this community. And there will be, as some of you have mentioned before, there will be more traditional events. There will be some innovative events. I mean, when you look back, some of the things that, sometimes we think we invented, gunpowder, right? Every time we do something fairly new. And you go back to history of our community, and especially in the States, you most likely will find a similar event that took place even sometimes 100 years ago. I mean, Diniz talked about radio, right? How innovative that was in 1920. You talk about in 1940, Five Wounds Portuguese National Church had a basketball team. If somebody created a basketball team now, people would say, well, why? Well, in 1940, the church had that. So I think there's ways to really engage people, but as several of you mentioned, we need to start by listening to our community first, right? And then responding with the appropriate ideas, and we should challenge them as well, because if people come back and say, I want things just the way they were, well, then we're going back to a black and white newspaper. You couldn't even recognize people in the pictures at the time in some of those editions and so forth. So I think it's really about, again, remembering the past, celebrating the present, and creating an innovative new future.
Thank you, Miguel. Manuel Aguiar, how do you see the young generation? What projects do you foresee to attract them, to engage them?
Artesia doesn't have a big issue on terms of having both languages on a TV station or radio. We have a very modern community at this point. The issue is to motivate the youth to come and be part of it when it comes especially to the TV station. But I would like to go back, like what Miguel said, we cannot forget the older generation, but we do have to think of the next one coming in. There's no doubt. Like an example, we are in Artesia, we're in the southern part of California. We're far away from the valley, and we're far away from the Bay Area, or even up more. I see us as media a little distant from each other, and sometimes I think we should have more communication. This panel that we have right here, I think it's great because we have different ages. We have Diniz Borges, which does a great job with the students. I've seen a lot of his programs to talk about the youth. Today, I noticed that Anthony Stives for the first time. I know what he's doing now. And then Joseph, I've seen a couple things from him because I know Joseph from Tulare. Well, it's a little closer from Artesia. I think we need, my honest opinion, we need an association media that we should talk about our communities and kind of talk what's our issues down here, what's the issues in the valley. We need to launch and we need to do programming for everybody to see what we're doing. We need to engage with other communities. But I think California itself is big enough that we should be more as a family on terms. Like an example, right now I'm showing an RTA programs from Montreal, back east, Costa Leste, and then we have an example, Romanel Diaz in College Office. They're great friends of RTA. We've done many programs together, and they really help what RTA needs. But I think our issue down here in the city of Artesia, or in this city of Artesia and surrounding communities, is that we need to know more about what's going on. And then this panel right here could help us, especially like Joseph could probably, or Anthony, or even Angela could tell us, you know, to motivate the youth, what we need to do in the southern part. And then I think that's what we need. And I've said enough it's really hard to get volunteers. We're talking about volunteers, not paid employees, volunteers. It's hard to get the youth to come in and dedicate themselves to a TV station at least once a week. It's not easy, but maybe there's ways. I've opened the doors for them to come in and do any kind of Portuguese program in English, to talk about the Portuguese community, talk about the youth, talk about what the youth needs in the southern part of California. And we've had no luck. But my suggestion is for us media to get together and help each other on those terms.
I really like your idea of creating a Portuguese media network. You know, and maybe one of you in this panel can take this upon yourself to put it together, because with the way of communicating nowadays, it's a lot easier to do.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there could be a product of this panel. You know, a challenge is one of you going to take this and start a network of the Portuguese media in all of its forms, and just make sure that everybody's helping each other, creating a situation where young people are attracted and they're engaged.
Right now we have Zoom. It's an excellent thing to use. This is a very good tool. And then I remember that for the Dancers Carnival, Joseph probably could say that, they used to have a meeting once a year, and they would meet in Tulare and Turlock. You know how far it is to go to a meeting? Right now we can do Zoom. It's a lot easier.
Yes. Hey, Angela, I think I'm just mentioning the things you like to do. What do you think about this idea of a network of Portuguese media? But you don't have to only talk about that, but you can also speak, of course, about how do we bridge the immigrant community and second, third, fourth generation. But would you take that challenge of starting some kind of networking?
No.
you already have plenty of that.
No, unless everyone on this panel would like my family to completely abandon me, but no. Nice try. So I don't actually remember your original questions. I remember it was part, and I think it had something to do with like, how do we involve the youth? That's it. So, that's something that Palcus has always struggled with as well. I will say we have been lucky enough to find a youth director, a young person to be on our board of directors, I should say. His name is Jordan Thomas. He lives in New Jersey. He's one of our past awardees. He's a phenomenal individual, and he's taken the lead on with the help of Diniz and Daniel DuPont, who's two other directors, formulating a youth leadership academy, which is something that is going to offer, workshops on leadership skills and different areas of industry to the young people in our community. And we're still, putting that together, but he has really taken the bull by the horns, and Diniz can vouch for this. The ideas and the work that he has already put into it has been phenomenal. And so we're very lucky to have him. And I totally agree with you, Emmanuel, that it's hard to find people who are willing to do the work. It really is. I think that's maybe one of the benefits we have of being a national organization, is because we're not tied just to one community. We can put the offer out there and the call for volunteers to an entire community nationwide, and it widens the pool, so it increases our chances of finding people that are interested in doing something and putting in the work. But I'm just going to go back to what I said earlier, which is we just have to ask people what they want and ask people to get involved, and make it clear to them that if you want to continue to see Portuguese celebrations, whether it's the festas or something new, but you want there to be a community for our kids and the next generations to inherit, it's their responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility to put in the work to maintain it, because the folks that are doing it now or eventually aren't going to be here anymore. And so we all have a responsibility to maintain that. And yes, that might mean, you skip a soccer game, or you skip something, you skip a meeting at school, or you have to sacrifice something else. You know, I know we're all busy, especially those of us with young families, and we're involved in lots of different activities, but we also have to decide where, you know, where do we want to dedicate our time? We want to see this happen. And are we willing to say, oh, well, if it doesn't exist anymore, that's just too bad? Are we willing to say that? Or are we willing to have that happen? Because if we don't put in the effort to do that, that could be what happens. And I think people need to have that sink in, that that's a real possibility. That if we don't put in the effort, it's not going to be here. Okay? Our grandfathers, our grandparents, our parents aren't always going to be here to keep it going. So that means it falls to us. So, you know, I know it's a lot of work, but you know, when have our people ever been afraid of hard work? You know, so let's tap into that Portuguese ingenuity. Let's tap into that work ethic, and let's tap into that pride and just get it done and stop with the excuses.
Thank you, Angela. You sure have that hardworking approach to things. I know you. João Manuel Dias, you know, you heard Davide Vieira, Miguel Ávila talk about this dichotomy of immigrant community, Portuguese speaking, and second, third, fourth generation, and of course the younger generation. How do we bridge these two worlds? You have any ideas? How do you do it?
Well, one of the things that how you do it, and it's highlight some of these youth. We have tremendous talent on the youth, and the ability of bringing those individuals into a newspaper article, to a TV interview, to a radio interview. Everybody likes to be highlighted. Everybody likes to be patted on the back. Everybody likes to, and I think by doing that, we probably could attract a few young people. The problem is, I have been trying to, and almost when you almost have the interview schedule, they always or tend to back out. So we have to continue that. And we have to use technology, the podcasts, the Facebooks, the social media, and so forth. And all of those things, you know, at Diaspora Media Group, when it comes to technology and radio producing and TV producing, there's only one person, that's me. So it's very difficult, and all of those things cost money. And unfortunately, you know, David talked about music rights. We have to pay. The same reports that David does, we do the same thing on a monthly basis, and we pay music rights, and that's our biggest cost. And believe me, sometimes we start scratching our head, how in the hell am I going to pay that? But fortunately, there's always been good friends that have helped us out, and we have been able to do so. So, like Angela said, we just got to keep on trying. I think highlighting them with more interviews of the youth. Maybe they play for the soccer team, and the soccer team is on first place. Maybe bringing that individual in and interviewing and putting them on the air. Maybe that will get them involved. I know when I was a young kid, what got me involved is I went to a soccer game and I sat next to people that were broadcasting the game. And I got so fascinated with it that from that day on, I wanted to be a broadcaster. So maybe that will attract these individuals to our media.
Very good, Ronald. Joseph, are there any ideas, projects that you would like to see in the future in the Portuguese-American community, in the media, particularly addressing the question of attracting more young people, maintaining them involved?
Yeah, that's one of the topics that I really wanted to dial in on as far as ideas and projects. I think just looking at what we've done recently in the Portuguese community here in California, the top two things that really stick out to me, that really have a lot of youth engagement, and not only youth engagement, but engagement from people outside of the Portuguese culture. Number one is the Festa das Filarmónicas. because you don't have to be Portuguese to play an instrument. People who love music will join their local community bands and play. And the Festival das Filarmónicas brings all the bands from all across California to one place. Those festas are always the biggest, most fun festas for me personally. I get to interact and hang out with a lot of people my age who have the same likes and talents and interests that I do. And then the other one that really comes to mind is the Folklore Festival, because that one has a glimpse of the traditional Portuguese heritage, but also incorporates the youth, because obviously the youth love to go to festas, they love to participate with their friends in these events. And when you get all the folklore groups from all across the state to come together, I think that really creates bonds of friendships with individuals who don't live in the same town or community. Some of my best friends live in Sacramento, Elk Grove area, from Artesia all the way up to San Jose. One of my best friends is marrying a girl from San Jose. I mean, and they met through a folklore festival. Those connections that we make with people all from our culture all across the state make those big impacts. One of the great things that happened in the last year was that big Portuguese festival that they threw together in, I think it was Turlock. That brought a ton of people from all over the state, Portuguese, non-Portuguese, quasi-Portuguese. I'm Portuguese by name, but I don't really attend or participate. Those people even turned out. It was a huge success. And I think if we can do more statewide functions that really bring everyone from all these communities together, and have activities and events and things to highlight the youth and the organizations from all across the state and get the youth inclined to participate in them, I think those will be the ones that have the most success in the future, because they're not just regulated to the small communities, they're regulated to the state and the community as a whole. As for bringing in the youth, I feel like that becomes more of a role on parents, to be completely honest. I'm not a parent myself, but I know that if it wasn't for my parents' dedication to the Portuguese culture, I wouldn't be involved in the Portuguese culture myself. And I see that with some of my friends who are now parents, who have fallen away from the culture and the events and don't bring their kids to these events. They don't actively participate and they don't actively put their kids in these places to, give it a shot. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't, but try. Go out there to the folklore practices. Just come with me while I go to folklore practice. Then they make friends with other parents who have kids. My 3, 4, 5 best friends, I met, I don't even remember when, I was 3, 4, 5 years old, at these exact practices. And we built that bond between us. And then we joined those organizations that brought us together in the first place. I think that's the biggest thing, is that community aspect, local community. Bring your kids to the things that you're involved in. Take them to festas, meet new people, network, get together, come up with ideas, then become involved, join the organization, join the leadership in the organization, and bring ingenuitive ideas to those places. And then for us in the media, we need to highlight, like João was saying, we need to highlight these people that are actively taking roles. The younger ones that are in presidencies and some of the boards of the hall, like give them a call and ask them what inspired them. Ask them for their stories and their motivations for keeping it. Because I think if you can highlight younger people in positions of leadership and their stories, it might entice or attract other people who have been like, yeah, that seems pretty cool. I do enjoy that. Maybe I also want to take a leadership role. And you bring in that cultivation of youth and awareness. And then lastly is on that word awareness, we have to utilize social media channels more to promote events, to promote functions, and not just the media companies, but organizations need to leverage the attention that's on social media. People who are watching TV, commercials, whatever, whenever there's a commercial on, the very few that actually watch TV, whenever there's a commercial on, they grab their phone, scroll through Facebook real quick, shows back on, they stop. So there's ways to reach people through there, either through paid advertising, through community engagement, just putting out content that's not even enticing, just like, look at this festa, it's so cool. Like people might be scrolling by and be like, oh, that's really neat. Or, oh, this prominent person's coming in, or, ooh, this musical act is going to be playing tonight, and lay out the dates and times and locations and just promote. There's not a whole lot of that. I know that the radio stations, the KLBS here in Tulare used to do that. And we try to do that with our podcast as well. We have a Calendario de Comunidad segment where we talk about events coming up in the Portuguese culture and try to get people to go out there. So if we could all leverage that and really just promote that, put it in our social media pages, and somehow get the organizations themselves to put it on theirs, maybe spend $20, $30 for an ad run to really just blast it out to the communities as a whole. I think that'll bring a lot more awareness and attract more people to these activities.
Great thoughts, Joseph. Thank you very much. Diniz.
I'll try to be brief. I know we're running over the time. First of all, I think that there's all of these ideas that were put forth. And when we talked about kind of a network of media, whether it be the traditional media or the new media, I think dialogue is important. And that is one of the things that the Luso-American Education Foundation has found with PBBI. And we're actually committed to putting some things together that we will be discussing first at the board level and then going from there. I think that we need a so-called Portuguese app where, you know, if I want to see what's on the Portuguese Tribune, I do. Where Cala a Boca is on there, where the Portuguese-American Hour, where KLBS is on, you know, where João Manuel Diaz's Diaspora Media Group. I think we need a Portuguese app where you know, I can connect with Manuel Aguiar and RTA. So I think an app that involves all of the different medias. I mean, João Manuel Diaz does that already with the Diaspora Media Group. That's exactly what it is. It's an app that has 5 or 6 radio stations. So I think we need to do that for all media. I think it would be the best way. The other way is there's a lot of stuff already being done. And we can't, you know, I mean, to what Manuel Aguiar said, it's hard to get people to volunteer. It is. And independently, if we want to or not, the issue is, how do we reach, you know, there's a good number of the community. You know, if there's 350,000 of us in California, and, you know, the biggest festa has, 20,000, if that anymore. I don't think there's any festa any longer with 20,000. I mean, you know, maybe 10,000. So, but if you go to those festas, and I know a lot of you do, it's not the same 10,000, but it's at least the same 4,000 of those 10,000, okay? And so so you're talking less than 10,000 people that attend these events. How do we reach the other 340,000? We have all these media outlets. So whatever's being produced by Cala a Boca could also have an outlet on João Manuel Diaz's radio stations. I know that he's passed our political podcast, and we appreciate that. And the Portuguese-American Hour, we would need to do that as well. You know, I mean, maybe, you know, we could make, and I know João has talked about that as well. So since Manuel Aguiar down there as well, so you have this time, how do we make these other media outlets available to everybody? You know, besides the traditional podcast. So if you're doing a podcast, how can we make it available in the traditional radio stations, in the online radio stations, you know, something about it, you know, also with the Portuguese Tribune, maybe a link in the Portuguese Tribune to these other podcasts, because I think that's what we need to unify. I think we're doing a lot, and I think we can't expect to do more for a community of our size. So I think we need a Portuguese app, and that would be the best way to do it. As far as, you know, because if we let something die, it'll never come back. And I recall this, and those of you recall, we used to have a radio station here in Hanford, KIGS. It was sold, and so it stopped broadcasting Portuguese. Everybody, I was concerned, you know, although I had some issues the way some of the programming was going because of my past history with Portuguese radio, but it was an outlet. And everybody says, "Oh, we'll get something." No, we haven't. You know, once something dies in the Portuguese community in the Portuguese language, it's very hard for it to come back. In English, it's a little bit different situation, and that's why kudos to those who maintain it in Portuguese, because if it dies, it isn't coming back. And exactly what David was saying is, a friend of mine have told me, you know, that has a Portuguese radio program. Cada vez que uma velha morre, eu perco uma família. And so, pretty much, you know what David said: when an old generation dies, the family's gone. So I think we have all of these things that are being done with, you know, all of these different outlets. And I just think that we need to unify a little bit more. So let's work on a Portuguese app for media.
There is great suggestion. And now Anthony Stibbs.
So I grew up I still am, but I grew up a huge film fanatic, movie fan ever since Christopher Reeve was Superman. That's how I learned English before school, was watching that movie. And I've always looked for a way of how to see myself being Portuguese on the big screen. And for the longest time, all we had was Mystic Pizza, which, I mean, however authentic that movie is to Portuguese culture, we can always debate. I don't think we're big pizza people, but, and it was throughout the years, always seeing these movies that were putting out cultures and had such a strong backing behind these films being made. You see movies like Moana or Coco, where there are these huge cultural experiences, and you watch those movies, and even if you're not of that culture, you have an emotional tie to the way these characters love their culture, love their background, and we can all relate to them. And I always have thought about ways of how we can bring these Portuguese stories, because we are rich with stories, no matter if it's amazing history we're proud of or things that, we really aren't that proud of. There's a lot of history we have that we can bring to the forefront that can bring us together and ways of telling those stories. That's, again, why my podcast came from my idea of wanting to make Sousa Mendes into a movie. And I couldn't do it. I can't have the time to write it yet, so I made a podcast about it. And what lacks is having this community backing behind these projects. And there's always going to be, in our culture, we always have the Portuguese who love this great new idea, and then some who are automatically negative toward it. And I always differentiate between, that's how in my head, I'm like, are they a Salazar Portuguese or a Sousa Mendes Portuguese? Which one are you when it comes to stuff like that? And we'd experienced it when we saw Nelly Furtado perform in Praia Victoria during Festa de Praia in 2002, when she was just becoming big. We loved it. She was amazing, the energy. And then there were old timers who were like, why isn't she singing Portuguese? Why does she do more Portuguese? The woman made an album called Folklore, which had majority of her using Portuguese lyrics. She sung Força, for crying out loud, and still felt like sometimes there was still a lot in Portuguese who weren't giving her the love that she could have had. And I still love the woman, but we don't hear her as much as we used to when she first exploded on the scene. So I feel that there needs to be a connection, a community connection, old and young Portuguese, to come together and build these ways of getting people involved, whether it's more podcasts, whether it's virtual additions to the Portuguese Tribune, whether like NPR will have sometimes video segments of a short documentary on a certain focus in Portuguese culture, or creating something of like a virtual museum of Portuguese history, or if it's the history of the Artesia Dias Hall and the Portuguese festivals that have occurred there, creating this virtual museum that people can go to and see how it started, who was the first president, when was the first festa held, stuff that's done in a way that's catches their eye visually as well as emotionally. And it's having that community there, because and it comes to movies again, we had Passionada, which came out in the 2000s, and recently we had Fatima, which Joaquim de Almeida was in that, Lucia Muniz was in Love Actually. So we're starting to see kind of a small trend happening where we're starting to get in the public eye again. And I feel if we get more of a community gathering and more of a connection between all of our communities, we can have the next Coco. We can have the next Moana of our culture. We can have Hamilton. We can do a Hamilton type thing on the Portuguese Revolution. There is so much behind that Carnation Revolution in '74 that can be made into, I see an HBO miniseries, but again, that's where my brain goes. But I just think all that starts with a small community that unites together in building these steps to getting to that level of recognition that I believe we deserve.
Thank you very much. Wow, amazing panel. Anyone would have known something about the Portuguese-American media before this panel. We come out of it well informed and inspired. And I thank each one of you for that. You have really contributed with a lot of thoughts, ideas, and possibilities for our Portuguese-American community. Thank you very much. I'll turn this over to Diniz Borges to give the final blessing.
Yeah, the final blessing. Thank you, José Luis. Thank you to the panelists, and obviously thank you, José Luis, for doing an amazing job. Sorry we've gone over a little bit, but we're just about to end it. I'd like to ask the chairman of the board of the Luz American Education Foundation, Eduardo Zebi, for some final thoughts, and then I will close with just a couple of things.
Thank you, Diniz. Thank you, panel, for another great session. You know, as I was listening, and I show you that there was a century celebration, 1988, of the Portuguese newspaper. At the end of it, there were 145 radio stations, a lot of radio stations. No doubt that the radio stations have contributed immensely to keep the Portuguese culture and the language alive in California. There's no doubt about that. There's the Portuguese stations that brought us our aspirations, the news, our anxieties. At one time there were everything. But now I ask myself, why do I listen to, or why do I watch a Portuguese station? And there's to be something in it for me or for our audience. Well, today, when I listen, for example, to a Portuguese station, there are two things that I want to know. One is what's going on in the community. Number two, good Portuguese music. And by the way, I do that when I'm in Portugal. When I want to listen to Portuguese music, I tune in to Portuguese USA. Maybe Paulo Matos, you know, and listen to good Portuguese music, because everything else over there is da-da-da-da-da. You know, I don't relate to that anymore. So now, how about the television? You know, we have now with this little phone here and Mod Bro, you have all the Portuguese stations, you know, every one of them, hundreds of them, plus all the sports stations. I mean, there's so much. You know what to do. But you know what? If I want to know what's going on in the United States overnight, I listen to the Portuguese station. I listen to the Telejornal or Jornal da Tarde. Why? Because the Portuguese stations have 3 hours of news. Here we have 30 minutes at night, and that's it, unless you want to, you know, watch CNN or Fox News or some other stations that repeat the same thing every 10 minutes, right? So by listening to the Portuguese station, I know what happened in Portugal. I know if Benfica was going to win or going to lose, the Sporting as well. And I also know what happened in the United States. I learned more from the Portuguese stations what happened to Trump and his wife and everything else than I did in the 30 minutes that they had here in the afternoon. So we need to have something for everybody, which is going to be difficult. But at least you have to get an audience that is going to ask the question that I don't want to ask. What's in it for me? I know that if we ask this question, we probably wouldn't be doing this today, because we are volunteers in the community. We are the Carolas that have been working, you know, for nothing. And if we ask the question, what is it for me, we probably wouldn't be doing anything anymore, right? So, but that's what you need to know is, what am I going to offer those people? So I know that we're over time. So I do want to thank you. And I want to thank our sponsors. I know they're all probably here behind me. The Luz American Financial, which it's been a great supporter of the Luz American Education Foundation. The Governo dos Açores, who's always been with us from the beginning. FLAD, Fresno State, and the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute. And of course, we have the Diaspora Media with Romanel Diaz, who have been great supporters. With this, I thank you, and I turn on to Diniz to wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. Just one final thought, and that is, I do think the Portuguese app is still a good idea, so let's investigate that as much as we can. I think connecting with the media is also a great idea, and I think that it is up to us to kind of move that forward. So PBBI at Fresno State will help as much as we can. We can help, as a matter of fact, with some of the coordination of certain things. So let's keep this dialogue going as much as we can, and let's try to do some new and innovative things as well. You know, we can't. I
forgot Fresno State. I should have mentioned that.
What's that?
Did I forget Fresno State?
No, you didn't forget anything.
Oh, thank
No,
you.
no, 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 no.
My
I'm gonna mute you. No, I'm just kidding. And so so thank you all. I think what this conference has proved so far is that indeed, as I believe Duarte Silva, who has attended all of these and has moderated actually two of them, as he said in the beginning, we have so much to put forth. We have so much talent, and we have. A lot of different things going on in the community, sometimes more than we actually think that we do. So we need to, filter this information and get it out and really dive into how do we get into those 345,000 or let's say 335,000 if we're 350 and only 15,000 go to the same things over and over. So how do we do all of that? I think it's a different time, but I think we can bring back some enthusiasm to the community, and media is certainly the way to do it and to keep people engaged. Thank you all for all you do. Thanks for all of your countless hours of volunteer work, whether it be in media or elsewhere. Thanks to and try to mention everybody. Try to mention, obviously, as the Vieira, Batista Vieira Media Group has done leaps and bounds. When nobody believed in Portuguese radio, they put it together. They still have a radio station that broadcasts 24/7, which is unique. It's one of the two in the United States of America as far as the open market. And then, of course, thanks to Miguel Avila and the Portuguese Tribune for such a commitment, and trying to be innovative as well, because I think that's one of the things that the Tribuna has to do. And him and I have had lots of different discussions, and I've had too many of them with his father. And because sometimes even myself, I say, who in the heck or who in the hell, to use that word, wants to read, a page of what I write. So, we all have to think of what we're doing in the new and upcoming generation. And so, thanks to Manuel Aguiar for 25 years of doing RTA and all the wonderful work that is done there. I don't know what the community would be in Artesia and Chino in that area without RTA, because indeed it's the only media outlet other than the Portuguese Tribune that's down there. And of course nowadays, with all the different things online. But before that, it was the only media outlet. And I can tell you that we can see where media is strong in the community. Usually there's some correlation with how the organization's maintained. Okay, and how those traditional organizations that Joseph mentioned maintain. How there are two things that tell us, how Carnaval, for example, has continued, and it usually goes around in communities that there's a strong media presence and a strong Portuguese language presence at the high schools or the elementary level. If those two, we look at all these areas, and that's where they're at, most of them. There are exceptions, obviously, and so thanks to Manuel, thanks to obviously João Manuel Dias for his innovative aspect. I think that it has a lot that it's going to do in the future, and I think because that kind of a radio, you can customize it to whoever's listening at that particular time. It offers a little bit more of that. And of course, thanks to Angela, who had to get off, and her courage to do a Politicus podcast. It's not easy to do a podcast where we talk about politics, although we're not partisan. So we bring in both worlds, and we try to eliminate all the partisan stuff, which for me is not very easy because I'm very partisan. But anyway, and so is Angela. We're on both, and we're on opposite ends. And so, but I think that is an important thing. And one of you mentioned that. I think that's something that we actually could bring, as Miguel mentioned, both of these things. Just this is, I think some of you might know this. In the 1940s and 50s, the Portuguese radio programs that existed in Northern California, Castelos Românticos, and the Sr. Azevedo, I think was Ecos de Portugal at the time, they used to have debates at the Kaiser Center in Oakland that would bring 900 people. Okay, and what did they debate? They actually debated things about the community. They, one liked bullfights, the other one didn't. One liked bands, the other one didn't. And so they were on opposite ends, and who knew what they liked and what they didn't like? But it was a way to bring momentum to it. So hey, if politics are going to bring something to the community, why not? Why not have a sort of a program that debates both sides? I think it'd be great. And so thanks to Anthony for his innovative, and thanks to Joseph I'm a follower of Calaboca. I do. I am. And I appreciate that you guys try to teach Manuel a couple of words now and here and there. I just don't know if he wants to listen to him. And now with Bruno, he has to listen to it. But I appreciate the humor, and I appreciate it's a different way to communicate with people. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do Calaboca, but kudos to the trio that does. And Anthony, I think that you can offer us a lot of things in the future, and I think our organizations need to use you a lot more. And hopefully you can help us well in lots of different things in the future that you're already doing. And I mean, your dreams are big. I wish I could live another 30 or 40 years to help you out as well, but we'll try as best we can. So thanks to all of you. Thanks to Luz American Education Foundation. Take care, stay safe. And to those of you, as a programming note, as we say in media terms, we will be on tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning with a showcase of Luz America, what Luz America is all about, between 10 and 11. And then we have a panel of 5 young Portuguese Americans, one not Portuguese American, who are college students right now, and to talk a little bit about how college is to them. It's quite a bit of a different experience than it was a few years ago. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and why learn Portuguese, because 3 of them are Portuguese language students at different universities, and 1 of them is not Portuguese. And so why take Portuguese? And so we'll do that. And then our keynote speech will be at noon with Paulo Teves, who's been following us, by the way, in the Azores at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so he will be giving the keynote speech in Portuguese, obviously, at 12 o'clock. Thank you all so much. It was a experience. This was a very rewarding panel, as all of them. I appreciate your time. And if I can ever help any of you, let me know. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for answering my call. Thank you. Good night. Boa noite.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night. Thank you all. Boa noite.